Berkshire with Eyes on the Prize, and this is Mike Boone, formerly of the Montreal Gazette, and now with Hockey Inside Out, formerly Habs Inside Out, if we're allowed to say that. And I just want to say a special thank you to Mike today, because a couple of years ago, Mike interviewed me for the then Habs Inside Out pullout in the Gazette, and that ended up getting me a couple jobs throughout the last couple of years and increasing my profile quite a bit. So thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
And
all I get for it is this lousy Coke in the video interview.
That's it. Well, at least you're sitting on the nice couch.
We'll work something out. Yeah, I'm on a nice couch.
All right, so Mike, I interviewed Marc-Antoine Godin a couple weeks ago, and you're also an alumni of McGill, like him. And
alumnus.
Yes, an alumnus. And we talked about what brought him to sports writing, and I think that'd be a great way to start with you.
Sure.
When did you realize that you wanted to be a sports writer? Were you a young man?
I joined the McGill Daily. At the time, there were no CEGEPs. They didn't have a CEGEP system in Quebec. So I went to McGill directly out of grade 11, and my birthday's in August. So I was like 17 years old at McGill. My high school had an enrollment of approximately 400 to 500. McGill was like whatever it was in 1965, 15,000 or something. I was lost at sea, man. I was in BCom 1 with the vague intention of becoming an accountant, which, if I were to think of any job that I am least suited for, that would pretty much top the list. Anyway, make a long story short, I was a poor kid from Parkix. I couldn't join a fraternity. There was this huge, intimidating place where I went to school every day, or most days. And I ended up joining the McGill Daily. English was my strong suit in high school, and I'd always been a pretty good writer. And they said, well, what do you want to cover? And I'd always been a sports freak, but I was the type of jock writer that was really shit at all sports across the board. My high water mark was being the 12th man on my high school basketball team. And I used to screw up the layup drills. It was impossible to establish any rhythm with my failure to dribble the ball properly and put it into the net. But I always loved sports. I read sports magazines when I was a kid. And, you dream of becoming a great star, this, that, or the other. So I said, we'll cover sports. I did I never covered the Redmond hockey team, but I covered the football team and the basketball team at McGill for my freshman year, and then I think my second year as well. And then some other stuff, I wrote about music and this, that, and the other. And Pat Hickey at the time was covering college sports for, I believe, the Gazette. It's hard to keep straight where, Pat has worked all over the country for various newspapers. Anyway, I got out of McGill with a BA, and as my friend jokes, what do you do with a BA in English? Open a poetry repair shop. I was doing just basically Joe jobs to pay the rent. It was 1974. I've been out of McGill 4 years. I was supervising the proofreading section of a computer typesetting company that specialized in legal texts, and that is even more boring than it sounds. Okay. And Pat Hickey out of the clear blue tracked me down through various mutual acquaintances and said, do you want to come to the Montreal Star and be a sports writer? It was like the furthest thing from my mind. After leaving McGill, I hadn't written certainly a word that anyone would pay me for, like no journalism whatsoever, but Pat remembered that I'd written some pretty good stories for the Daily, and he gave me the job at the Stars. That's how I became a sports writer. It was like a lightning bolt out of the blue, an extremely lucky break, and there I was. I did it for 5 years. I was covering the Expos in Pittsburgh toward the end of a pennant race in mid to late September, when in 1979 when the Star went out of business. So that's how I got into sports writing, pretty much by happenstance. A couple, Pat Hickey, to whom I will always be indebted, found me and gave me the job, and the rest was history for a while at the Star, and then a whole bunch of stuff at the Gazette.
Was it were you always an all sports kind of guy, or was hockey more high on the radar, being from Montreal?
When I was a kid, I could never skate properly, and I had a profound aversion to cold. At the time, was outdoor rinks. I've never played ice hockey in my life, ever. I played a little bit of ball hockey in the street, but my preferred sports, wow, probably football and basketball when I was young. Football, just, pick up, fooling around in the park, and then basketball, quite a bit, playing in the gym with friends of equal ineptitude, which was great fun.
Being a predominantly English speaker, like you said, raised
Entirely English speaker.
entirely English speaker.
Predominantly.
You don't speak French?
Oh yeah, I speak well. Not that any French person could tolerate. Yeah.
Well, you can write, right?
Yeah, I'm good in winter because when they cover their ears, they keep them warm.
And it sounds vaguely like a language
sounds
they can
vaguely
understand.
like French. Yeah.
Well, you're better off than me.
Well, you have the excuse of being an Albertan.
Yes. Well,
I have no
hey,
excuse at all.
Saskatchewanian. I only live in
Saskatchewan. Yeah. No, I've often said, given the way things worked out in Quebec, I'd like to launch a class action suit against the Protestant School Board of Greater Montreal. Because when I began to have French classes in grade 3 and had them straight through grade 11, and it was taught just as, you could have been studying Italian or Chinese. There was no sense that this would be not only important, but absolutely essential for your life, because that's not the way things were in the 50s and 60s. Moreover, because it was a denominational school system, I went to Protestant schools. They didn't employ Catholic teachers, so I never had a Quebecer teach me French, right? It was like, Protestant or Jewish French teachers. So it was just ridiculous. It was very poor preparation for what Quebec turned into. And a lot of people my age, I'm 64 and approximately the same boat. It was a very long answer. I've even forgotten your question. You're about to ask, is my French good enough, or is it?
Well, I was just going to ask, did you find like you've had different jobs through the Montreal Star and the Gazette throughout your career? Do you find that writing predominantly in English or only in English was a bit of a challenge in this market? Or?
Not really, because I worked in the kind of what I'll call the boutique sections of the newspaper. I did 5 years of sports at the Star, and it was college sports covering English colleges, and then covering the Expos on a full-time basis for 1 season. So no French required there. Then I came over to the Gazette. I was initially hired to be the rock critic's understudy. The concerts that he just couldn't bear to attend, I was sent to. And there again, it was all English acts. And then I became the radio and TV critic, and again, I wrote a little bit about what was happening on the French side of the TV or radio dial, because my comprehension has always been really good. I understand almost perfectly, but speak rather poorly. So I never really needed it, even when I started to do Habs Inside Out, because English is the working language, really, of the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, definitely. Were there different kinds of stories in your career that made you more excited to write about, or was it just kind of, writing was writing, it's a job?
No, there were stories that I was tremendously excited to write about. My favorite times, I think a lot of people might surmise that covering a baseball team for a season was as good as it gets. I'm sure Melnick would say that. He's never done it. He's a total baseball freak. And I had a fine time covering almost an entire season with the Expos. But my best assignments were 2 Montreal Symphony Orchestra tours. One in Europe in 84 and one in Hong Kong and Japan in 85. Because it was just, and I covered them as though I were covering a sports team. That's what the people at the orchestra used to say, because they enjoyed reading about it. Because the paper decided, I think very wisely, they could have sent the classical music critic who would have said, whether the second violins blew certain notes in the performance here or there. They said, no, the average person doesn't want to read that shit. They want features and some impression of what it's like to be with an orchestra. And I did that, and it was just so, I became a classical music fan, and the people they're so smart and funny, and they know a million jokes, and they all hate the conductor. And it was just a tremendous experience. I've
cool to be able to cover something that almost changes your perspectives as well.
Yeah, and see cities you've never seen on somebody else's dime too. You know, I went to Berlin, went to Paris, went all over Switzerland, Tokyo. Pretty cool. Hong Kong, yeah.
Do you find that having more of like a broad spectrum of what you've covered made you a better, or give you an advantage that, say, like a strictly sports reporter wouldn't have?
I would think so, yeah. Yeah. But I think I've never been, boy, this is going to come off like a total pretentious dick. My interests have never been narrowly focused on sports. I don't now. Not even when I was a sports writer did I live and breathe and eat sports. You know, it's what I did for a living, something I like very much. But my idea of leisure was not to go in a bar and have a passionate argument about who should be batting cleanup for the Expos. The year I covered the Expos, my best friends, with whom I did an alarming amount of drinking, couldn't give a shit about baseball. You know, they were musicians, they were layabouts, they were just, you know, it was another world. So I've never been narrowly focused on sports. I think it's great, and you know, it's the opiate of the masses. It prevents a lot of people from losing their minds. But you know, it's just another thing. It's just part of the palate, you know.
Or causes some people to lose their minds if you listen to after-game call-in radio shows.
Why would you ever want to do anything like that, Andrew? I mean, you know, your masochism is your problem.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite sports-specific story that you've ever covered?
Oh boy, I guess you'd have to say the Canadiens playoff run. You know, the Expo season was great. You know, they had a good season, and I'd never done anything like that. So just from my own perspective, it was fun. But the Canadiens playoff run, where the whole city was pulsating with the excitement of it, that was pretty cool. I liked that a lot.
2010.
Yeah, the Arrowhead miracle. You know. Yeah.
And Mike Camilleri with the 13 goals and everything.
Yeah, it was fun. And mainly because not so much, you know, what was happening on the ice was great, but, you know, you're watching the Washington Capitals get 73 shots. And it's not, you know, it's not hockey at its best exactly.
No.
But the whole city was so excited, and I think it'll come again. I hope we'll live to see it where, because you know, the memories of when I was younger, I became, I think we spoke earlier in our conversation about football and basketball being more of my interests. I got into hockey big time based on two factors. Ken Dryden came up and led the Canadiens to a miracle Stanley Cup. And I'll always remember that playoff run because I was smoking grass like there was no tomorrow. And the combination of that great hockey and being, you know, I guess it was about 1970 by then. It just, you know, it seemed to click. And being a doper kind of slowed down hockey to the extent that I would actually be able to see the puck and follow it. You know? So became a fan. But let me hasten to add, Andrew, for public consumption, that you know, I don't cover games or anything in that regrettable and illegal state of being. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Well, only partially illegal, right?
Yeah.
In certain amounts.
Yeah.
Speaking of the 2010 playoffs and the feeling of the city, do you think that because it's been so long that it's kind of a different feeling now? Say if the Canadiens were to win the Cup in, say, like 2 or 3 years, do you think it would be more euphoric now than it would be, say, in like 1993?
No.
No? You think it's always the same Montreal?
I think even though 93, help me with the math, it's 19 years.
20. This season would be the
20.
20-year anniversary.
So there's a whole lot of people born in Montreal who have never seen the Stanley Cup. And that wasn't the case when I was young. I mean, we had the teams in the 50s, we had a few cups in the 60s, the great teams that Bowman had in the 1970s. But there's something in the DNA of the city that there's that memory there. And, you know, the old joke was that there would be the announcement of City Hall, the Stanley Cup parade will follow its usual route.
Yeah.
And I think there's, at the back of our minds, we still think of it as somehow our God-given right. And, you know, it should happen every year, and when it doesn't, it's some sort of aberration. at the time, you know.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
And big disappointments like the
Big
90s,
disappointments, yeah.
trading away stars constantly.
I was Doug Wickenheiser. I mean, there's a lot.
I wasn't
Years
alive
and
for
years
that
and years of horrible drafting. Horrible drafting. So it astounds me. I'm a big NFL guy. And to look at, I always figure in a salary cap / draft league, how is a dynasty possible unless the general managers are morons as they were when Sam Pollock was, was running the Montreal Canadiens. But look at New England, year after year after year. It's amazing,
It's
amazing
like
stuff.
taking advantage of all the competitive advantages disposal of, I suppose.
And being totally unsentimental. They've had fabulous players that Belichick will cut in a New York nanosecond. He doesn't, it's all about the team and it's all about getting better all the time.
You are a bit of a pioneer when it comes to moving print media into digital media.
Yes, I was out there building my log cabin, on
Yeah.
the night, hoping the engines wouldn't raid, pioneer spirit.
Yes. Well, Habs Inside Out was basically the first of its kind for a website where you could get all of your Montreal Canadiens news with real inside sources, guys that would talk to players, interviews, and it was free, and comments were open. It was, it was something that hadn't existed before that, and most teams still don't have a media-run venue like that.
Do you know the genesis of it? Have we ever talked about that?
I think you've talked about it before, but it'd probably be really interesting to.
I don't even remember what year. I think we're on to our fifth or sixth year. I think. The editor-in-chief of the Gazette at the time was a fellow named Andrew Phillips, moderate sportsman. And he went off to one of those conferences in the United States where newspaper executives get together and wring their hands and hold their heads and say, oh my God, the internet is killing us, whatever shall we do? And he came back to Montreal, and I think he knew that Stubbs and I were kind of hockey fans and like internet people, that were interested in the net at the time. And he said one of the more interesting speakers at the conference was a guy from a suburban state of Washington paper, not even a Seattle paper, suburban paper, small paper, who launched a site that was Seahawks, and nothing but Seahawks. Recorded interviews, all the coaches' comments archived, stats of the yin-yang. And he said, I wonder if that could work in Montreal. What do you guys think? And that was it. It's the, I used to cover TV, and the story was the genesis of Miami Vice, which became a hit series, was Brandon Tartikoff, the head of programming at NBC, was at a meeting with some people and scribbled on a napkin, MTV Cops, and boom, the next thing you know, they had a hit series. But this was this was how Habs Inside Out began. He kind of tasked Stubbs and I with A, was it practical, and B, how shall we do it? And we both took to it like a couple of fish to water. At the time I was the city guy. I wasn't even in sports. Stubbs was. Nobody in sports was. Red Fisher didn't want to the day he left the paper, didn't want to have anything to do with it. Jack Todd, not remotely interested. Hickey, to his credit, saw that it could maybe turn into something. But Stubbs and I were basically able to invent it from the ground up. And one of the, bearing in mind the experience of the guy that covered the Seahawks, what we strove for was completeness right from the get-go. Try to get everything you could possibly want to know about the team should be there. And because the internet is limitless, everything should be archived. That was it. That's how it began. And as you said, I think it was pretty unique at the time. Even now, I don't know how many papers have a site like that dedicated to the team.
There definitely aren't very many, and I know for us, we're always chasing you guys for hits and things like that. And
yeah, well, we have the immense advantage of access.
Oh, for sure.
Because you're a legitimate journalist. You know what I mean by that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you just,
of course.
you happen to work for a traditional medium, so you get that card in your hand that lets you walk through into the sanctum sanctorum, and
Absolutely.
talk to the players and get some audio, video stuff like that. And I lucked into the recent. I didn't invent the live blog. I had become a soccer fan. I guess I was doing city columns on I don't know what year it was, World Cup. And just, going around to bars and seeing what are the Korean kids watching and what are they saying. I guess it was the year it was it in Asia one year? Anyway, I got into soccer and I started to read the Guardian soccer coverage, which is like great stuff. And they would live blog games, but they did it. They had people that understood soccer inside out and backwards, and they would go in for really long hits where the guy would get in a conversation with a Manchester United fan in Hong Kong. He'd say, so-and-so thinks that this penalty kick should have been, or that should, back and forth, and this and that. And I had the idea, I said, wouldn't it be neat if I could do that for the Canadians? And thus was born the live blog. But soccer has the advantage of when the ball is bouncing around in midfield, 8 guys are doing headers, you have time to write 140 words. In hockey, I find I'm just, it's just kind of blip, 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 because especially hockey now is like pinball.
Yeah, it's tough to get stuff out, especially coherent thoughts, spell check it, and make sure it's ready to go.
Yeah.
The live blog is probably the hits monster on HIO, but what I always enjoyed was the About Last Night. Did you, when you were approaching digital media, did you have an idea of what you were going to do with that? Were you approaching it the same way as you would with print, or was it kind of like, I have unlimited space?
I made it up as I went along.
Yeah.
And the live blog, as I said, was inspired by The Guardian. I didn't do maybe I started About Last Night in the first year. I kind of, I'm pausing now. I don't want to put down colleagues, but the stories that would appear in the Gazette were deadline bound at the time. The Gazette didn't have a big online presence.
Right.
And, Pat, or in some cases Red, were really up against it, to do a game story by 10:15, or whatever the deadline was at the time. And I said, why don't I take advantage of A, no deadline, B, no space limit, and see the opportunity to blow off a little bit of steam. And I said, About Last Night used to be literally About Last Night, because I'd do it in the morning, get up and, kind of sleep on what I'd heard. Big influence. I'd drive home and listen to Ron Fournier, listen to all the people phoning in to talk about the game and Ron Fournier's own stuff. Sleep on it, get up and write that. And then a couple years ago, I decided that, no, man, this is the internet. You can't wait until the morning to do it. At the time, Arpon had his website going, and he was writing terrific game stories. Like Arpon is one of my heroes.
He's excellent.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And I said, no, I can't. Arpon was posting, I think, around Crazy Bastard with 2 young children. He's posting at like 3:30 in the morning or something like that. I don't know how he did it. But I said, no, I got to get something up a little bit sooner. You got to be in the game. You can't wait. Who cares at 8 o'clock the following morning?
Yeah.
So
It's kind of old hat by then.
it's everything. Well, on the internet, things are old hat 20 minutes later. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. Moving on from specifically just writing, we dealt with a horrible year last year, which I don't know about you, but after a while it was hard to think of things to write about, although, now it's lockout time, so it's even harder. But do you think that there's a chance of a better result this year? Do you have any impressions of the lineup?
I think they're a couple years away still.
Yeah.
I think they just, I thought Hamilton would have a fabulous team, and they don't. But we'll see, it's early. Let's see what develops down there. Lots of work to do. And it is a developmental league, so, if they don't win the Calder Cup, we won't hang ourselves in the closet, right? I think they're coming off a fabulous draft. They could have got 4 or 5 NHLers if you consider the potential of the guys they drafted last summer. So you know, I don't think a series of last place finishes would go over terrifically well in the city, but let's just cool our jets a little bit and build something, and build teams the way the good executives build teams.
Take the long view.
Yeah, take the long view. I like Bergevin. I think that was a good hire. Terrien, we'll see.
You think Terrien can get them to the playoffs, or do you think it's going to be a just miss kind of thing, or kind of no hope from the start?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think it's no hope from the
No.
start. I think once you get past the first, well, maybe the first 3-4 positions in each conference, it becomes a wild chase. They could finish anywhere from 7th to 15th again. Although, again, I don't think they'll finish last.
No. It'd be pretty tough. I think you've got, Price coming into his prime, and same with Subban, Pacioretty.
Yeah.
The big questions are going to be the older guys, right?
Yeah. I don't know if Aaron Cole has another season like that in him. He takes a
Pretty tough.
hell of a wear and tear, the way he plays that style at his age. Tough.
Yeah, I was reading Stubbs at the beginning of the summer. He was saying that by the end of the year, Cole, even though he didn't miss a game, he was hurting quite a bit.
Yeah.
Which
I saw it when
kept scoring.
When I went out west with the team. I think it was in Edmonton, maybe Edmonton or Calgary. You saw him with big, massive bandage I think on his hip or his knee or both after the game. Took a hell of a pounding. We all do. It's a tough league. It's a brutal league. Brutal. Worse than the NFL.
Yeah, it's a grind, and
Yeah.
82 games plus, right?
And the travel and back to back. You play a physical sport like that back to back. It's insane. It's just asking for injuries.
Makes you wonder what the kids in the AHL playing 3 games back to back sometimes on a weekend.
Yeah.
That's got to be pretty rough.
Well, it can't be as, they say, what do they say when they come up? The big adjustment is in the speed and in the making decision, time and space, quick decisions and that. So it's not quite as intense, I guess,
Right.
in the AHL. So,
Did you have any specific years, like during the regular season, where you had guys in the room that made it more entertaining to cover the team, or was it kind of, you see the same faces year to year for the most part, other than 2009?
well, Camilleri was always good. He was good in the room. Kovalev, Koivu to a degree. Camilleri stands out.
Yeah.
Because Camilleri, understands the media game to a greater extent.
Smart guy.
Yeah, smart guy. And calculating, too, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, sure. Yeah. I'm suspicious of guys that like people that do what I do, professional athletes. Should be adversarial like politics.
It seemed like Hal Gill was always a pretty good
Hal
coach.
Gill, yeah, I overlooked Hal Gill, always terrific. Just if you went into the room, if you saw where the massive scrums were, it was Hal Gill and Camilleri. I'm trying to think of some others, and so many players over the years. Yeah. That's about it, yeah, those were the...
So I know that your favorite interview of the Habs was always Andre Kostitsyn. Was he a great
He's
interview or
fantastic.
the greatest interview in hockey?
Well, not wide restricted to hockey. I did other sports as well. I did TV for all those years, talking to people who communicate for a living. Andre is basically an amateur who speaks. It's almost, has anyone used Shakespearean as an adjective for what came out of his mouth?
I'd go net, score goal.
Yeah.
Does it get any better than that?
Yeah, Andre, wow.
Well, that's probably all I've got to ask you, Mike.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I owe you again. And
You don't owe me anything. It was fun.
so that was Mike Boone for Hockey Inside Out, and thank you for watching.